Hello, everybody. Back again with a Wild Roof podcast episode. We have a full house today. Kathryn Wilder is joining me, as well as Simmons Buntin. Really right off the top, I'd like to set up both of the guests today. It's an honor to be joined by these two authors, and both have new books. So there's a lot to talk about naturally, and a little bit more into the genre of creative nonfiction or narrative nonfiction. So if you're a nonfiction writer out there, you'll definitely want to stay tuned and listen up. Kathryn Wilder is a writer and rancher in Dolores and Disappointment Valley, Colorado. She is the author or editor of 5 books, the latest of which is called The Last Cows on Ranching, Wonder, and a Woman's Heart, which is forthcoming right around the corner at the beginning of November. And thankfully, it's available for pre-order now. So a little bit about the Last Cows, told from the unique perspective of a woman, mother, environmentalist, cowboy, and rancher. This work of literary nonfiction conveys the joys, challenges, heartbreaks, and qualms of contemporary ranching in the American West. Just because I'm a poet and sympathetic to the poetry side of things, I'll just add Joy Harjo, the wonderful Joy Harjo's blurb for the book. In Kathryn Wilder's new offering, The Last Cows, there are cows, several kinds of cows. What I didn't expect was an ecological journey of fine attunement to the land, to the elements, to the living inhabitants of the ranch area, and a penetrating spiritual awareness that can happen within the grueling everyday work that it takes to care for and run a cattle ranch in Disappointment Valley. If that sounds appealing, you're not the only one here. That's the setup for Kathryn. And Simmons Buntin, the author of Satellite, Essays on Fatherhood and Home, Near and Far, is a tall drink of water who seeks a certain beauty in all of his pursuits, whether writing, editing, the award-winning online journal terrain.org, lecturing, making photographs, managing projects and teams, or even walking the dogs. In Satellite, the new book, Buntin delves into the idea of belonging in place, time, family, and community in 16 essays written over nearly 2 decades. The pieces range throughout the desert Southwest on both sides of the US-Mexico border and as far afield as Mount St. Helens, Montana, Vermont, Sweden, and even the moon if a telescope atop Kitt Peak counts. Buntin examines the beauty and challenges of raising a family and creating more sustainable communities, and more broadly, in any of America's diverse cultural and ecological landscapes. So with some of those details all buttoned up, I'd like to just say, both of you are welcome to share your thoughts with each other's responses and questions and go back and forth. So I just want to make sure it's open to each of you to chime in as you see fit. One place to start, I guess, it's as good as any. Kat, in the beginning of chapter 1 of your book, so starting with the starting point, you receive a piece of advice. No spoilers yet, but it's right at the beginning. So the piece of advice that you share, and this is kind of back in the 80s, and near the beginning of your journey, I suppose, in the book, don't ever fall in love with your cows, is the piece of advice you receive. So you didn't take the advice. So maybe that's just kind of like, I'll throw that out there to you, and like, what does that mean? What was it supposed to mean in the moment, and how did that how did that not get followed, I guess, in your journey?
I tried, but that's just not me to not fall in love with animals of whatever kind. Um, the reasons not to fall in love with your cows, and this was my he wasn't my husband yet, but that's who said it. Um, he said, you never know when you'll have to sell them. If it's a dry year, she doesn't get bred, or she loses a calf, or the market goes way up, and you just can't pass up the opportunity. She goes to town, which means, yeah. So, um, right now, I mean, we just sold a bunch of cattle, we being my son and I, because partly because the market is way up, and so sometimes you have to take advantage of the financial situation, because so often you can't. I mean, there's, the financial benefits are limited. um so it's a kind of a career full of heartbreak and challenges and all of that. And it's kind of like writing in a way. I mean, you work your ass off and you don't necessarily get paid. So, yeah.
Right off the top of things, I mean, there is such like a concern for the economics of the places that we engage with the natural world, whether it's selling cattle or something different. So yeah, how I mean that doesn't seem like any easy thing to navigate, I suppose. I mean, you may be used to it at this point. Is there a difficulty there in terms of like how to wrap your head around doing something because you love it and engaging in the realistic and practical economics and financial aspect of like running a real cattle ranch?
I think that one of the hard things is we sell grass fed and finished beef. We take excellent care of our animals. They're not, no antibiotics, no hormones, no grain, and things have changed just in the however 10 or 12 years we've been doing it, so that the cost of taking the animals to the processors, which we have to do to get USDA stamped to sell, the cost of the processing is kind of prohibitive. So we want to sell our beef so that anybody can buy it, but we kind of can't, and we don't make. I mean, the margin of profit is not big, so that's a hardship on the economic level. And right now, the cattle are worth more just running them through this sales yard, than they are the finished product, and that's I don't like that. We don't like that part of it. But I don't, the economic aspects of ranching, that's not the most intriguing topic.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. Well, yeah, it's just
uh,
it is that kind of like tension point of like, the reality of things and maybe the more romantic or storytelling aspect. You know, Simmons, I could throw it to you for a moment. The idea of teaching, I mean, a lot of your essays in the book revolve around the family and fatherhood. Maybe you can share a little bit about like what was the inspiration and the motivation to write about that more specifically, and how have you found that process of trying to, share your appreciation and love of nature to the next generation in your family?
I haven't thought about it too much about teaching as a concept, but of course we're always teaching and we're always learning in everything we do. I will say that I love higher ed. I mean, I work in higher ed now. I have a graduate degree in urban regional planning, which certainly informs a lot of the essays and how we build community. And speaking of economics, even economic development and how we redevelop, let's say, sustainable suburban downtowns, for example. But I guess the answer to your question, Aaron, is I spent a lot of time out in the woods as a kid, growing up in Central Florida, well, even Tucson before that, and that certainly informed what I'm interested in and what I wanted to pursue. I had not the greatest relationship with my father, so when we had our own kids, I wanted to to do the two things, I guess, that my father and I didn't do, unfortunately, which is spend time together outside. And it's hard not to do that, frankly, here in Tucson or sort of anywhere we are. We grew up on the road trip and big fans of the road trip, so I always took my daughters to various national parks. We drove across the country several times, and that's kind of informed my thinking. And then I guess writing about my daughters wasn't something I had initially planned to do. I'm a big fan of writers like David Quammen who do braided essays, but they have lots of personality, but they're not necessarily about the writer. They're not first person essays. But I did a graduate program in creative writing here at the University of Arizona, and in sharing my writing, it was certainly the essays about my daughters that got the most positive response. And so those are largely, but not solely, what fills Satellite.
That is some of the interesting territory for this type of writing, kind of layering that personal experience along with the more like the cultural message or kind of engaging with either its contemporary culture or historical context or something like that. Kat, maybe you can consider that for a second, like in your personal narrative approach, and your book is, organized like chronologically, so it does fit into it is easy to read as a narrative. How aware were you, or like how deliberate were you with like connecting to these different larger contexts, whether it's like, yeah, cultural, natural, historical, anything like that?
Well, at first I was just writing. I mean, that's I just write and I usually write essays. I don't have the ability, I guess, to conceive of a whole book, like it's in pieces. Though I write, piecework and then I put it together. For example, I wrote an essay called In the Rut that Simmons published in terrain.org, and it was an essay, definitely was an essay. And then, but I wanted it in the book as a chapter, and so then, I added to it and I changed some things. I mean, if Simmons reads it now, he would recognize it. It's still the same basic piece, but so I just had pieces and I started putting them together, and then because it is a narrative, that I had to do some transitions, and then clearly, and I'm writing about the same place, and so or my son, I don't have to say my elder son Ken every time I mention him, by people are going to know who he is pretty early. I don't know if I'm answering your question at all.
Yeah, yeah,
I mean, I've been I'm older than you both, so when I started my degree at Northern Arizona University, creative nonfiction or literary nonfiction wasn't considered a genre. I mean, there was nonfiction, which was your more the kind that you don't add yourself to. But I wrote what was then called personal essays, and that's what I've always done. I went back I got that degree, and 25 years later I went to the Institute of American Indian Arts and then got a degree. So one was a master's in creative writing, and the next was an MFA in creative nonfiction specifically. And it was really interesting to see the curve, what had happened and how. And then actually the focus was so much on memoir. I kept saying, I'm not a memoirist, And then apparently I've written two memoirs, which I didn't mean to do, but they're really the essay and the personal essay was kind of just what I was doing, and then I worked them together.
And Aaron, if you don't mind jumping in here,
absolutely.
the question of sort of the narrative arc for creative nonfiction as a book is a really interesting one, and it's changed, I feel like, in the last 10 or 12 years pretty radically. I remember having a conversation with Scott Russell Sanders, who's a wonderful essayist, out of Indiana about 10 or maybe even 15 years ago now. And he was lamenting how he was having difficulty finding a publisher for a book of essays. And we're talking about one of the best place-based essayists of all time, in my opinion. And that really made me sad because around that time I was working on what was in effect this same book, but an early version of it. And I was thinking, okay, well, I'm going to have to change these essays, do a lot like what Kat just said, which is kind of turn them into a more narrative, connected piece. But I think that's changed. And one of the books that helped me realize how that's changed, I mean, the market's changed, but also the press's willingness to publish more disparate essay collections, was a book published during or maybe just after the pandemic by John Price. It was published by University of Iowa Press called All Is Leaf. And I know John, he's a terrain.org contributor as well. He teaches at University of Nebraska, Omaha, a really terrific place-based writer, writes a lot about the prairie as well as about raising his sons. And that book has a lot of different types of essays as well, from very narrative to lyrical to experimental. And for whatever reason, that gave me license to say, hey, you know what? I can include some of these essays that originally I wasn't going to include in Satellite. And then, of course, when the publisher agreed, that was great news. So I think we're in a time where nonfiction is such a wide spectrum and accepted as such. And that's a really beautiful thing. So it doesn't have to be a memoir. We don't have to be pigeonholed in that, or it doesn't have to be, a biopic of somebody else. It can be personal essays, it can be lyrical essays, it can be long form journalism, it can be all of those combined. And that I think is as a reader of essays and a lover of essays, I think that's great.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. Yeah. I was thinking the experience of a reader, I don't really mind like the aspect of variety, and it is something I encourage or mention to writers that I work with in terms of like, yeah, you can have in a poetry collection a span of different subject matters and tones and styles. It's that balancing act of like they hang together, it's cohesive, but there's variety, so you don't feel like you're just carbon copying the same thing over and over again with little slight variations. So the
Right, and you can really set the structure of the book accordingly as well, especially in poetry, of course, but even in nonfiction, break it into sections and do something like that to kind of guide the reader if you want to have similar pieces together or even have those speak together. I'm really interested personally in the white spaces, even certainly in poetry, but even in nonfiction, whether it's super lyrical or narrative, how we can take advantage of the white spaces to give the reader time to pause and absorb the various sections. The white spaces, even between chapters or essays, depending on what you're reading, I think are so critical.
Mhm.
oh, yeah, I know I maybe never thought about that as much with the prose collection. But yeah, your book, Simmons, does have like photos embedded in at the start of each chapter, for example, and then Kat's yours has photos and images as well interspersed throughout. Is it like the paragraphing, even section breaks within an essay, just creating different chunks? Is that part of your intention then too?
Yeah, for me, it is a pause. It's a pause for the reader and for me as well, and it indicates transition, like it's not going to be a sentence or necessarily even topic that's exactly continuing from the previous paragraph. So I love white spaces. Yeah, I use them a lot, and I think they're just kind of a sign, that says slow down for a minute to the reader, and even you can put the book down and come back to it because there's a natural sort of break right there.
Yeah, and if you're writing, as I have done with several of my essays, braided essays, where you have two seemingly disparate topics that you're writing about or writing to, and they finally come together in the end, and hopefully some sort of epiphanal moment. The section breaks are critical there. And in fact, I have to admit, I argued with my publisher from a design perspective that they didn't give enough space between the sections or even sort of in introducing each of the essays. But one thing I use to help that in some essays, especially if you kind of want momentum building and building, is a numbered essay. So each section has its own number, and it may or may not be chronological, it may or may not be linear, but it continues to build so that by the time you get to that last section, that last numbered section, there's a point to the numbering, first of all, and it sort of concludes satisfactorily in that kind of, well, we think of list poems, but maybe almost a list essay in a way.
I mean, yeah, the experience of a reader, it's easy to kind of visualize what it looks like on the page and how that impacts your experience reading it. I remember in college, you kind of get those like little editions. They're just kind of small and compact, and they had like no margins, and like the pages were very thin. And it's just like a nightmare to read like Moby Dick in this like compacted version with no, you like have to hold it by your fingertips because there's no margin. And just the experience of taking in the taking in the information and the sentences and the art, and it's like, wow, it really does have have an impact. Even playing off of that, in one of your essays, Simmons, you kind of mentioned the technology of like listening to music. So there's like, a parallel in how we take in text information and how we take in music. And I guess counterintuitively, maybe the more available music is, like the more disconnected we are from hearing things, right? That's the overarching message. Do you have anything to fill in with that, maybe?
Sure, yeah, I'm really interested in the interplay between technology and place, and particularly technology and either whether it's our built or natural environments. And what spurred the essay you're talking about, which is titled Songbird, was I was up in New Hampshire at one of the state parks, and there was a kid who, this is back in the mid 2000s, so right as iPods were sort of coming out before phones and before AirPods, but certainly with earbuds. Had his earbuds in and was listening to music, and we're outside of this beautiful waterfall, and it got me thinking, well, how does that experience, how does listening to music at what was a really loud volume, I could tell, um, impact his experience out in the wild? And so, I kind of wrote around that, and what you realize, my presumption was it changes it not for the better, but my realization in sort of exploring that and doing the same thing myself and writing about that was, no, it's just a different experience. It doesn't mean it's a better or worse experience, whatever that is anyway, but it certainly alters it. And of course there are ramifications of using devices like that, phones and whatever, and what that means socially. And we've learned a lot about that since then. Most of it, unfortunately, not very good with when it comes to isolation and whatever. But it is, the world we live in, and technology certainly plays a huge part of who we are and what we do. So I continue to think about that, and I had a lot of fun with that essay. It was kind of one of those you write in real time. Okay, well, I'm going to go take a walk. I'm going to listen to the Rolling Stones as I walk through the Vermont wilderness, and let's just see what happens.
And one of the things I wrote down was just like considering like the analog experience. So yeah, that's kind of a way. Okay, let's play around with it. Let's see how these two things interact. But like kind of going back even to Kat, like your experience as a rancher, like it doesn't get more analog than that. You can't fast forward, you can't skip ahead. Um, there's something really really intriguing about, I guess, like how connected you must be to the animals, to the surroundings, even before we started recording, to the weather patterns you're kind of mentioning. So through your own experience, how has that connectedness developed? Did you learn it along the way? Was it something you gained early in life? Was it something that came from somewhere else? Was it formal, informal?
I don't know that I had to learn that. I think that was a need for connection to the place, the Aina, that's the Hawaiian word. It was in me, and I needed to find wherever I lived, even as a kid, I needed to find a way to connect. That was my maybe my spiritual grounding. And so my life choices, other than being a heroin addict, my life choices were all about that. I made choices about where I lived and what I did and how I worked. And like I tried a 35-hour a week indoor job, and I couldn't. It was at a publishing house, and I was an assistant editor, and so the work was right for me, but I couldn't be inside that much. I can't, it doesn't work for me. So I've been lucky in that I could follow follow that need, that drive, and just create lives around it. I mean, I cowboyed and ranched, with my first husband, and then did other things in between. Was a river runner, and then in Hawaii paddled outrigger canoes, and so both of those things are very connected to the land and place. And I think I read recently on Facebook that there's a name for, I guess, people, or the syndrome or whatever, of people who are writing or doing whatever and can't listen to music while they're doing it. I think Linda Hasselstrom wrote something about it on Facebook, and I was really interested because I can't. I just don't have any. The only sounds are what the animals around me make, my dogs, my horses, the cows, whatever. The turkeys, like when I'm out in Disappointment Valley. I mean, just listening to all that going on around me I mean, that's life. That's real.
Kat, how about when you write? Is it the same way? You can't listen to anything. You've got to have silence,
Silence.
or
Or,
or the sounds of the world, I suppose, more than silence.
absolutely. Absolutely. I can't, and maybe it's, I don't know, maybe it's something, multitasking I'm not very good at. But when no, I'm listening, I'm feeling, I'm writing about what I hear. Uh I just, no, I don't have music, and I don't even, just in my normal life, I don't have sound on unless I'm driving somewhere, and then I stopped listening to the news in January, and and I listen to a lot of books on tape now, and that's okay because I'm driving and I can fully get involved in the book. I pay attention to the road too, but yeah, but I couldn't. I just, yeah, I can't do it.
That's interesting. I'm sort of the opposite. Not about the news. I'm with you on that, but that I always have music going. Not always in our house, although we have a old record player, and I love to put vinyl on. But that's, speaking of analog, that's a beautiful analog experience. But even here, so I am in front of the screen at least 40, sometimes 60, some 70 hours a week because of the work here that I do in my full-time job, and then with terrain.org, not to mention writing when I can squeeze that in. But I do have writing, but it's almost like white music for
Huh.
me. I'm sorry, white
Yeah.
noise. May or may not be white music, but white noise for sure. And but it can't be something I'm unfamiliar with, and it can't be something that has let's say too intriguing lyrics, because then that sort of, you go into that world, you start thinking about that, and that's not what you want. But so a lot of what we might call shoegaze or light jazz, or things along lo-fi, things along that nature. But for me, I don't know, there's energy with that, a kind of a low sustaining energy that I appreciate.
Yeah.
Probably similar in that sense that there's certain tasks that I can, or actually probably benefits having that kind of something in, whether it is just some kind of instrumental music. But yeah, if it has lyrics or something that I would, like too much, then it's not something I could listen to while I'm, trying to do something. And then it really, if it crosses a barrier or it's like too much brain power is required, whether it's writing even if it's just like responding to email writing or creative writing or anything, then it's okay. I gotta press pause on that one, and go back to the other tab and go to it. So yeah, I definitely have like found different ways where it's intersected, where it's been helpful, and then kind of enhanced certain types of tasks, and then engagement and focus, and then okay, that's enough of that. But it is if I go for a walk, I'll definitely be listening to a podcast. It's one of my like it's definitely something I enjoy, but also like, it probably would be good to to put that aside once in a while just to cleanse the palate.
Yeah, and there, when I'm walking or hiking, I never listen to music except for that experiment there. Driving, yeah, for sure. But yeah,
Yeah.
not when I'm sort of, so yeah, it's interesting, right? Maybe it's to get out of the unnatural environment of the office and the workspace and all that kind of
Yeah.
stuff. It helps me escape a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah, and I do like it is one of those paradoxes of like a quote nature writer. It's like how much time out of nature we have to spend, to get the work done. Anyway, but yeah. And then this other theme that maybe both intersects with your work is the theme of awe. And you mentioned Simmons, the Scott Russell Sanders, and you mentioned his book, A Private History of Awe, in one of your essays, which I marked to look up because I'm not familiar with that. And I know that the researcher Dr. Keltner has a lot on awe and exposure to nature, even if it is nature on a screen, how that influences behavior and the internal world and things like that. How do you maintain that kind of healthy sense of awe in day-to-day life where you're able to stay tuned with that because it is so easy to push that aside, get stuff to do, tasks, progress to be made. Is it, yeah, is it intentional, natural? Like, how do you keep that connection with awe?
Yeah, I think the answer is yes. It is intentional and it's natural. I think it's a question of focus. I think we can find awe anywhere we look, if only we look for it. I feel that way about beauty, and really, you could almost say those are interchangeable terms. So when I'm walking the dog in the morning, is it the sun rising over the Rincon Mountains? Is it a desert willow flower that's dropped on the sidewalk? Is it the dew glistening in the little pocket park grass? Yeah. Is it, as in the essay you referenced, which is titled Stopover, being within nearly an arm's length of, 1,000 or 100,000 sandhill cranes? Yeah, that certainly is awe too. But I don't think we need to count on some miraculous or overwhelming experience to find awe. In fact, I think it's essential that we don't, because if that's all we're looking for and hoping for, then the periods between that aren't probably as fulfilling as they could or should be.
Yeah, does awe play a role in your day to day?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that the subtitle of The Last Cows, which, I'll show it right here, is on ranching wonder and a woman's heart. And wonder and awe are, similar, the same, whatever, and joy. So it's I look at all those. I mean, I look at the ideas of those and wildness and wild and what those words mean and what the experiences are. And I just feel lucky because I'm surrounded by, I mean, like Simmons said, it can be the simplest thing, which is, just I just watch the horses, and who is like the dominant gelding. He just flicks his ear and everybody else moves, and I just love to watch that kind of stuff, and it fills me. And it can be, I don't know, the colors of the leaves falling, the wind, the way the rain comes, the patterns of the rain flow down the driveway, all of it is, I guess, awe-inspiring. And I don't know, I haven't lived in a city for 50 years. So I don't know how that would be for me, I just I haven't. I live where the veneer between inside and outside is as thin as it can be, and so awe is all around me. I wouldn't thrive in a city.
Kat, I love that term veneer, thinking about that, whether it's you're in a very rural or wild place or even in the city. That's such a lovely, um, well, it's more than metaphor, right? But it's so lovely.
Thank you.
I do want to read a quote, but I do want to ask about the beer essay, Simmons. So that was one of the intriguing pieces. A little while ago, you were referring to like, would this fit in this collection? It seems a little different. So what was the impulse to include that essay? I think it does fit and it does it does connect, at least to my eyes. Like yeah, a little kind of like a little teaser as far as like what your used that personal, hobby experience interest to, connect to the larger themes that you're going for.
Right. Yeah. So the Biter on Tap is a personal history of craft brewed beer, is how I think of that. And it fits really because, again, we can have a wide array of essays now in any book, really. But it's fundamentally about craft and building community and how locally crafted beer, in this case, it could be locally crafted anything. It could be a farmer's market, you name it. It could be beef, whatever, how that brings the community together because it's authentic to the place, literally in its flavor, but also in the people who come there and enjoy that together. And also, I just really like craft brewed beer. And the other thing is, and a lot of my essays, I hope you found have this. It's deeply researched, and research is a critical part of much of my writing. And so it's so fun to explore the history of beer. Did beer really come before bread? Did beer really come before civilization itself, which was founded so that you could have grains to create beer? Maybe that's some of the speculation. It's pretty fascinating.
Yeah, I used to be a little more into whiskey and scotches, and so that is that same kind of doorway that you enter into. Like, whoa, there's a lot more there than just like picking a bottle up off the shelf. And then the second thing, it's interesting tidbit. It was new to me in that essay was that something that wasn't the Mayflower stopped at Plymouth because they ran out of beer instead of continuing.
Yeah, that's what the history books say, at least those history books that I'm reading. So, right, rather than going on down to, I can't recall if it was Jamestown or where they were headed, but yeah, they stopped at Plymouth Rock there instead because, I mean, imagine the mutiny. And actually, if you think about it, water was pretty scarce, right? But beer could last longer. I mean, obviously, water is the base there. And the whole history of how, especially in Europe, they would give beer instead of water because it was safer to drink. It's interesting. I'm not sure we should be doing that today. I'm not that much of a fan of beer, but um, it's a rich history to be sure.
Right, yeah, preserves the grain that would spoil, gives you water. But yeah, it would be, in today's terms, it would be, the alcohol content would be much lower for those purposes than
Yeah, and
than
I
maybe
had to
some of them
change
today.
that essay a bit because when I originally drafted it back in the mid 2000s, the speculation was that some alcohol, little alcohol, might actually have a health benefit. The truth is today that's not believed to be the case. And so I had to modify that a little bit. It was like, maybe this is my saving grace, but in fact, it's not.
Yeah, I know. I wish that that were true. So still, yeah, a little bit every day that I could deal with that. But yeah, actually, I would like to read just a short passage from each of your books, and then give you an opportunity to say anything, add anything onto it if you wish, just to kind of highlight one of those kind of reoccurring themes. So I'll offer that. Kat, we'll start with yours, which I love this sentiment. I write because I hope we think about where the food we eat comes from. And if we eat beef, grass-fed and finished beef, buy local, stop at the farmer's market, and get to know the local rancher who produces the food in the most humane way possible. And learn that the same rancher loves her cows and horses, and we may love the same land beneath hooves and grass and rocks and junipers and our own boots equally, both you and that rancher ultimately wanting the same thing, health for the earth and health for each other. I want to write to be part of that conversation. So yeah, I mean, boil it. I don't know if you could boil it down more than that, but health for the earth and health for each other. I mean, put a put that in a frame and up on the refrigerator or something. See it every day.
Thank you.
So yeah, if you have any response or anything to add there, go for it.
I think that the sort of question behind the book is, can cattle and desert lands be compatible? And so I don't come out and just say yes or no, but I'm looking at the different species of cattle, or not species, sorry, the different breeds of cattle. And, we choose to run the breed that we do because it is a much less impact, has a much lower impact on the soil and the environment. And I really believe that if other ranchers in the Southwest, if more ranchers in the Southwest ran those kinds of cattle, it would benefit the land a lot, a ton. Of course, they're probably not the people who are going to necessarily read the book. So I don't know that message is going to go out there. But yeah, so that what you just read is from the end of the book, and kind of encapsulates what I'm hoping to say overall.
Yeah, thanks for that.
Thank you.
And then Simmons, a little passage. Creating community that includes wildlife, the native species of the place upon which the streets and houses and parks are later built, is important for a number of reasons. Sharing our built environment with wild animals ensures that we avoid an antiseptic life that would be a part rather than a part of our desert habitat. That would not be life, but lifeless, defining the desert based on only its inanimate structure, rock, mountains, cactus, creates a flawed definition. So I appreciated that too, because it kind of changes the perspective a bit of how we look at the world around us. And another one of those themes, like interconnection or interdependence, the more we are aware of that and the more we can appreciate that, I think the better.
Right, and how we define community. Is it just humans, or is it the human in the more than human world? And I argue there that it is the more than human world, even with the risks that we have, whether it's running into rattlesnakes or grizzly bears or wolves or whatever the case may be. It's more than just a richer experience. It's a more human experience. Now we have to be wise, of course, about how we interact, and of course, therefore, where we build and how we build, and we haven't always been wise by any means there. But there are, ways to exist more amicably with the more than human world, and that's a hope of mine still, even to this day.
Excellent. Yeah, I think that's a good place to sign off. The books, Simmons, yours is out now, called Satellite.
Do you have it with you? Okay, I want to see it.
Yeah, we're gonna let's do a book trade. I don't have it with me, to be
Okay.
honest with you. I'm at work because I'm just not thinking, apparently. But
Okay.
Yeah, and it's like I said, it's beautifully designed as well, like you were mentioning earlier with the visual aspect of it. And yeah, I'll put a link, of course, to the book page so you can look into it further. And then Kat, yours officially is out in November, which will be after this is posted anyway, so it's out now for our purposes. It's called The Last Cows, And again, I'll put a link to that. Wonderful books. I've definitely enjoyed taking a peek into them, and will continue to do so over the next couple of weeks. Again, it's a pleasure to talk with you both, and congrats on the books, and best wishes to you both.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Aaron. It's been a pleasure. And Kat, it's always great to speak with you.
Yeah, wonderful.